Hello everybody and welcome back. For this video, I want to address and respond to the questions that I got submitted, the grammar questions that I had asked you to submit last week. Um, if you didn't submit those, you can still submit them and I'll, try to still maybe type you some answers back. But I just wanted to give some verbal answers to a few of the questions here. The first thing I'll say, if you haven't watched the video that I posted about grammar already, and if you haven't looked at those couple of handouts that I gave, the one called comma splices, and I think the other one is called grammar explanations, you should take a look at those two documents and also watch the video that I did where I kind of go through them and try to explain them. Because a few of you guys asked about commas, and I'll try to explain it again, maybe a little bit differently than I did before. But I think my other video on grammar, I tried to say everything I could about commas, and that document, the grammar explanations document, gives you some of the basic rules about commas in terms of trying to figure out which rule it's fitting into when you're using a comma. So I would definitely take a look at that video if you haven't seen it yet. But all right, let me get into the questions that I got here. Okay, so the first person asks, how do we use semicolons, brackets, and hyphens? So these are definitely confusing, and I think these three, semicolons, brackets, and hyphens, you could get through college never using any of those, is the first thing that I'll say. So if it's seems very confusing, I'll explain them, but if you still don't get it, or if it just seems scary, you can totally get by just not using those things. They're more stylistic stuff, which it can be good to use. It can add some style and flavor to what you're writing, but if you know that you have a professor who's grading on grammar really harshly, and you're, you could possibly getting a bunch of points off if you use these things wrong, you can just avoid them and not use them. But anyway, semicolons. What a semicolon does is it connects two sentence fragments. So two things. Or sorry, excuse me. Let me start over. Semicolons. What it does is it connects two things that could be their own sentences, but you want to stick them together. I think I gave an example in the other video. But the thing about semicolons is that each thing on the given side, on each side of the semicolon, has to be something that could be its own sentence, but you just want to stick them together because they're related or for effect or something like that. Which again is the reason why you could get away with just never doing it. Brackets. For me, in an academic essay, brackets really only come up, which brackets, they're kind of like parentheses, but they're more square, it's kind of the square parentheses. The only time I really use those in writing essays is when you're using a quote, if you're quoting from a source, and say that in the source, because it's a whole article, it said like it was talking about whatever, some famous person talking about the president or something, and it says he did this, right? But in your quote, just for it to make more sense, you don't want it to say he, you want it to say the name. You know what I mean? What you could do in that case is you can get rid of the word he and put in brackets, President Joe Biden said whatever, and then give the quote. Um, and the brackets indicate to the reader that what's inside of those brackets was not actually in the article, because in the article it said he, it didn't say the name, it just said he. Um, so by putting in brackets, you're telling them that this isn't what was actually in the quote, but this is what they meant. So because obviously, if it was a quote and you're giving it to the reader and it just says he did this and he did that, the reader might not know who they're talking about, so it'd be confusing for them. So if you use the brackets, you can change he to the actual name, and then by putting in brackets, you're telling them that this isn't what was actually in the article. If you go and find the quote, it's not going to say the name; it's just going to say he. So by putting in, you can put it in brackets for the quote like that. Again, not something you need to do. You could just put he, like to introduce the quote or something. So you can get away without doing it, but it allows you to change the quote in that way to make it more understandable for the reader. Hyphens, the rules about hyphens are extremely confusing, and honestly, I think people just use them like when they want. Like sometimes they should maybe be using a colon or a comma or something, and they just use a hyphen instead. I would avoid hyphens in academic papers just because everyone has different rules for them. If you're worried about the professor being a stickler about grammar, for me, I'm not too worried about it. So if you wanted to throw a hyphen in there, you feel like it helps, like to kind of break up the thought or something like that. I'm fine with that. But if you have like a grammar intensive grading going on, I would just avoid hyphens altogether because the rules about them are very murky. Okay. So next question I had here, this person asked about the difference between who and whom, which this is again probably something you can avoid in academic papers, but I'll give you the explanation. So in grammar, you have like a subject, a verb, and an object, right? So if we had a sentence, I went to the store, right? I would be your subject. That's the person doing the thing. I is the subject. Went is the verb, right? It's a version of to go. The verb is to go. It's the past tense, so we're making it went. I subject, went verb, and then store is the object, right? Store is the thing on the other end of the verb that's being acted upon because you went to the store. So you are the subject, store is the object. The difference between who and whom is that who is a subject and whom is an object. So if I asked you who went to the party, right? Who would be the subject? Went again is the verb, and then party would be the object. Who went to the party? I could ask you, and that would be grammatically correct. Now, if I asked a slightly different question and I said, "You went to the party with whom?" Now it's whom because it's the object. Because in that sentence, I'm asking you the question, right? You went to the party with whom? So you there is still the subject because you went, right? It's still you is the subject. Went is the verb, and then since whom is now being used as an object, it gets changed that way. So I think that's the right example. Actually, I might check that. It's very confusing, but it's just that if it's a subject, it's who. If it's an object, it's whom. Again, probably something you can get away with avoiding in an essay. Most of the time, it's who. Um, so one trick for kind of looking at this is if there's a preposition before the thing, then sometimes it's whom. That's why you see like for whom did you go to the store? Which is not a way we would talk. I'm trying to twist the sentence around to make it work. But the word for is a preposition, or like the word to is a preposition. So I would say like to whom it may concern or something. So the word to or something like that is kind of a hint that what comes after it is going to be the whom instead of the object. But again, probably something you can just avoid using for an academic essay. Okay, this person asked about the three different kinds of their THER, their THEIR, and their THEY apostrophe RE. So the different meanings here. Their THERE is a place over there, right? Under there. That THERE is a place. Their THEIR is the possessive one, right? That's their book, you know. THEIR is the one that shows possession of a thing. One way I try to think about that is like the one that has the I is the one that's about possession, because I is like kind of it's you, it's possession. So the one about it's their house or whatever, the thing that belongs to them, that's the one that has the I in it. And then THEY apostrophe RE, that kind of there. So that one, since it has the apostrophe, I think it sticks out because that one, what we're doing is we're combining two words. It's they are, and we're combining it to be their, THEY apostrophe RE. So since it has the apostrophe, it's really two words because any apostrophe is always really two words, right? Like can't, it's cannot, and it's smashed together to be can't. So there is they are smashed together. That's why it has the RE, and it just has the word they. So that's the three different kinds of there, and hopefully that helps to remember a little bit. Okay, somebody else asked about run-on sentences and commas. Again, I would go back to the other video. I think I said the best stuff I can say about commas. But if you have run-on sentences, you might be dealing with comma splices. Like if you're putting a comma where you should be putting a period, which is something I think we do a lot, especially when we're writing like on social media or in text message. Because it's like if you use a period on a text or on the internet, it's like you're mad at the person or something. So we want to separate our ideas with commas. But that's actually a run-on sentence if we're doing it, for an academic essay. So basically, what you want to do is think if something could be its own sentence, just end it there. Think if there's any way that you could break up these sentences, especially if you have a sentence that's more than like, I don't know, 3 lines long, or if you're using the word and or the word but more than one time. I try to keep it to one usage of and or but. If you're using the word but 3 times in a sentence, that's probably a run-on sentence, and you could probably split it up. Because anything that's just one idea can be one sentence. I went to the store, period. I went to the store, but it was raining and I slipped. Okay, that can still be one sentence. I went to the store, but it was raining and I slipped, but then I caught myself and actually I didn't fall. But then I kept walking and I, got hit by a car. Too many buts, and ands, right? Break it down. I went to the store, but it was raining. While I was walking, while it was raining, I slipped and fell. After I got up from having fallen, I walked into the street and got hit by a car. That could be three separate sentences at least, right? That's just an example. But usually, if you can separate the sentences, I would just go with that. Like I said, if you're using the word but or and a bunch of times, that's a hint to you that you're maybe going to have a run on sentence there, and maybe you can break it up into smaller sentences. Um, or if it's more than like 3 lines or so. And like, sometimes when people write books and when you get to the highest levels, people write these really long sentences. But just to keep things simple for now, if it seems like it's getting too long, just ask yourself, is there some way I can break this up? Is there some way I can stop this and separate the ideas? As long as you have a subject and a verb, it's a sentence. So I went to the store, sentence, done. Doesn't need to be any more. I think just look for places where you can kind of break it up with the commas. And again, go back and review the different comma rules that I put on that grammar explanations document. Okay, so next person asked, they said, is it actually bad to start a sentence with the words and or but? So I'm sure this is something you've heard before. You can't start a sentence with the word and or the word but or because. You can't start a sentence with that. It depends who you ask. For me, I've read plenty of academic essays, academic books where they start the sentence with and or but. So I think it's fine. I'm totally fine with it. I think that it makes sense. I think there's reasons to do it. I think it can be sort of a transition. It can be a nice way of like your one sentence is done, but now let me show you something different. I think right there I ended my sentence and then I started it with the word but the next sentence, the way I was talking. So I'm definitely fine with that. I don't think it's a problem. It depends on your teacher, though. Some of this you have to know the person who's going to be grading your paper, which is annoying and unfair. I kind of agree. But if you have a teacher who's very very worried about this stuff, they might enforce a rule like that. I think it's a bullshit rule. I think it's fake. I don't think it exists in the real world. When you read actual books, people do this all the time. So I'm fine with using and or but to start a sentence or because as well. Or like using the word I in an essay. That's something that actual writers do all the time, that actual academic writers do all the time. So I have no problem with it. Okay, so those were all the questions that I got there. Again, watch the other video, review the documents I posted, and if you have any other grammar type questions, or if it still doesn't make sense, I'll try to explain it a different way, or I'll try to find a video maybe or a written explanation that I can direct you to that tries to explain it differently to help you understand. But yeah, you can send me an email if you have any other specific questions with this. But that's all for now. Talk to you soon.